Not a peaceful silence, but a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothers all other sound. Alex sits hunched on his worn sofa, the room around him steeped in shadows that seem deeper, more menacing than usual. The air is unnaturally cold, clinging to his skin despite the closed windows. Days have bled into night since his last terrifying encounter, each moment stretching into an eternity of anxious waiting. Sleep offers no escape, plagued by nightmares that echo the whispers and shadows haunting his waking hours. His apartment, once a sanctuary, now feels like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, and every rustle of leaves outside his window send jolts of adrenaline through him. He hasn't left, hasn't dared to step outside where the chilling presence of Mr. Grayson looms, a constant, unseen weight in the neighborhood. But the isolation is becoming unbearable, the fear inside his walls growing as potent as the fear outside. A low whisper seems to slither from the corner of the room, indistinct yet undeniably malicious. Alex flinches, his eyes darting towards the source, but there's nothing there, only shadows playing tricks on his frayed nerves. Or are they? The feeling of being watched is intense, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck that refuses to subside. He wraps his arms around himself, a futile gesture against the invasive cold and the encroaching dread. The question burns in his mind, a desperate need battling against paralyzing fear. What does Mr. Grayson want? Why him? The ambiguity is a torture of its own. He knows, with a certainty that chills him to the bone, that he cannot continue like this. Hiding won't save him. The silence needs to be broken, even if the answer is terrifying. Steeling himself, a fragile resolve forming amidst the terror, Alex rises slowly from the sofa. His movements are stiff, hesitant, but driven by the dawning realization that confrontation, however dreadful, is his only path forward. He has to face Grayson. He has to ask. Stepping outside is like plunging into icy water. The cold night air bites at Alex's exposed skin, far colder than it should be for the season. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seem to writhe with unseen movement. His neighborhood, once familiar, now feels alien and hostile. Every house he passes seems to watch him with dark, empty windows. The silence here is different from the one in his apartment. It's an expectant silence, heavy with the promise of something dreadful. His footsteps echo unnervingly loud on the pavement, each sound amplifying his sense of vulnerability. He keeps his head down, avoiding eye contact with the shadows, with the darkened windows, with the oppressive weight of the night itself. Yet, he feels eyes on him, unseen observers tracking his progress. The whispers seem to follow him, carried on the chilling breeze, slithering around the edges of his hearing, mocking, threatening. The closer he gets to Mr. Grayson's house, the heavier the atmosphere becomes. The air grows thick, stagnant, carrying a faint, unpleasant scent, something like damp earth and decay. Doubt gnaws at him, a cold counterpoint to the fear. Is this madness? Walking willingly towards the source of his terror? But the memory of the suffocating silence in his apartment, the feeling of being cornered, pushes him onward. The need for answers, however terrifying, outweighs the instinct to flee. Finally, he stands before it. Mr. Grayson's house looms at the end of the street, a dark silhouette against the bruised twilight sky. It seems to absorb the light, radiating an aura of profound wrongness. The garden is overgrown, twisted shapes clawing at the peeling paint of the walls. No lights are visible within, yet Alex feels an undeniable presence emanating from the structure, a cold intelligence watching, waiting. He approaches the front door, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. The wood is dark, weathered, and cold to the touch. He hesitates, his hand hovering over the surface, the whispers seeming to intensify, urging him to turn back, to run. Taking a ragged breath, fighting down the surge of panic, Alex forces his knuckles to rap against the door. The sound is dull, absorbed by the oppressive silence, yet it feels like a momentous, irrevocable act. He has crossed a threshold. There's no turning back now. He waits, trembling slightly in the unnatural cold, bracing himself for whatever horrors lie beyond the door. The door surrendered with a groan that seemed to sigh into the oppressive quiet, and Alex hesitated, his breath snagging in his throat like a caught thread. Framed in the doorway, Mr. Grayson stood, as if he'd been sculpted from the very shadows clinging to his hallway. His smile, stretched too wide to be genuine, was a frozen tableau. His unblinking gaze, a pair of obsidian beads fixed intently on Alex. The meager light spilling from the depths of his house painted long, grotesque distortions across the worn floorboards, and the air that wafted out was a physical presence, cold, stale, and laced with a faint, metallic tang that sent a visceral wave of nausea rolling through Alex's stomach. "Come in." Mr. Grayson's voice was a silken murmur, measured and almost welcoming. "I've been anticipating your arrival." A primal alarm shrieked in Alex's chest, every instinct screaming for him to retreat, to slam the door, and flee back into the relative safety of the street. But a desperate need for answers, a gnawing hunger for the truth that had festered in his sleepless nights, held him captive. With fists clenched so tightly his nails bit into his palms, he crossed the threshold, the aged floorboards beneath his weight protesting with a series of low creaks. The door, as if possessing a will of its own, swung shut behind him with a soft, insidious click, the sound echoing in the suffocating silence like the closing of a tomb. Alex flinched, his senses on high alert. The hallway was a claustrophobic passage, swallowed by twilight, the faded wallpaper clinging to the walls in brittle strips, peeling away like sunburned skin. The air hung heavy, thick with an unidentifiable miasma that prickled Alex's skin and tightened his throat. The shadows here were not mere absence of light. They possessed a restless energy, flickering along the walls with jagged, fluid movements, twisting into impossible shapes. The familiar chill, a preternatural cold that seemed to seep from the very foundations of the house, descended upon Alex, its icy tendrils biting deep. "Mr. Grayson offered a languid gesture towards a barely visible archway. "Please." His voice remained a soothing caress, utterly at odds with the palpable dread. "Make yourself comfortable." Alex remained rooted to the spot, his gaze darting frantically around the suffocating space, absorbing every minute detail. The unnerving way the shadows stretched and elongated, defying the meager light sources. The faint, rhythmic tapping sound, a delicate yet persistent percussion, seemed to pulse from beneath the very floorboards on which he stood. The oppressive weight of the air, a tangible force pressing down, stealing his breath. "I'm not here to sit." Alex's voice trembled, betraying the fear that clawed at his insides. "I want answers." Mr. Grayson's smile remained stubbornly fixed, an unsettling mask. He tilted his head, a slow, deliberate movement, his unblinking eyes, dark, fathomless pools, studying Alex with an unnerving intensity that made his flesh crawl. "Answers," he repeated, the word laced with a subtle amusement, a hint of condescension. "Is that the commodity you believe you'll unearth within these walls?" Alex's hands balled into tighter fists, the sharp edges of his nails digging crescents into his skin. "I know you're involved in this," he insisted, his voice gaining a desperate edge. "The shadows, the whispers, the doll, it all began the moment I moved here. You know what's happening. You have to." A soft chuckle escaped Mr. Grayson's lips, a low, unsettling sound that seemed to vibrate through the stagnant air. His smile broadened, revealing just a fraction too much teeth. "You truly believe this? Inconvenience revolves around me, Alex?" he asked, his tone laced with a patronizing calm. "Oh, my dear, this was never about me. Then what is it about?" Alex demanded, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and frustration. "Why is this happening to me?" Mr. Grayson's expression remained unchanged, yet a flicker ignited within the depths of his eyes. Something ancient, something knowing, something profoundly dark that sent a cold twist of premonition through Alex's stomach. He took a deliberate step closer, his movements fluid and unsettlingly graceful, and Alex instinctively recoiled, his breath catching in his throat, a silent scream trapped within. "You extended the invitation, Alex." Mr. Grayson's voice dropped to a soft, chilling murmur. "You unlatched the door." Alex froze, the blood in his veins turning to glacial ice, his chest constricted, a vice tightening around his lungs. "What are you talking about?" he whispered, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "I didn't invite anything in." Mr. Grayson tilted his head once more, his unblinking gaze unwavering, locked onto Alex's wide, terrified eyes. "Curiosity?" he breathed, the word imbued with a strange reverence. "Such a potent catalyst, wouldn't you agree? It draws them, Alex. It nourishes them, makes them robust. And you have been so remarkably inquisitive." A wave of nausea, sharp and acidic, surged through Alex, His mind raced, piecing together the fragments of terror. "The shadows," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "They're drawn to curiosity?" Mr. Grayson offered a slow, deliberate nod, his unsettling smile never faltering. "They are drawn to those who seek what lies beyond the veil," he confirmed, his voice a low, conspiratorial murmur. "To those who peer too intently into the darkness, who pose too many probing questions. They thrive on that yearning, Alex. It fuels their growth. And you have provided them with a veritable feast." Alex's chest tightened further, his breath coming in rapid, shallow gasps, each one a desperate struggle for air. "I didn't know," he choked out, his voice trembling with the weight of dawning horror. "I didn't mean to. The intent is irrelevant now, Alex. Mr. Grayson interrupted, his tone shifting to a calm yet utterly final pronouncement. "The portal has been breached, and now they are here." The shadows clinging to the hallway walls seemed to writhe with a renewed vigor, flickering and pulsing with a palpable energy, their jagged edges stretching and contorting into even more menacing forms. The preternatural chill intensified, biting deeper into Alex's skin. The faint tapping sound emanating from beneath the floorboards grew louder, more insistent, a frantic percussion directly beneath his feet, and a horrifying realization dawned. It wasn't just a random sound, it was a summons. What do they crave? Alex's voice was a strangled rasp, the question tearing through his constricted throat. Why this? Devouring? Mr. Grayson's smile, a grotesque fixture until this moment, finally fractured, the lines around his eyes tightening with a semblance of something akin to sorrow? "They don't want little Alex," he murmured, his voice a low, sepulchral tone that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. "They hunger. They exist in the spaces between, drawn to the frayed edges of perception. Their nature is not of desire, but of a gnawing emptiness that seeks only to assimilate. Once a thread is woven, the tapestry becomes theirs. There has to be a way," Alex choked out, desperate. "A way to unravel this." Grayson's smile turned predatory. "Unmake what you wrought, little seeker? Resistance only feeds their thirst." The shadows writhed, tendrils snaking across the floor as Alex recoiled. The air grew thick, whispers slithering into his mind. Hours now. Alex clamped his hands over his ears. "Silence!" he screamed futilely. Grayson watched, unnervingly still, as phantom touches, cold caresses, brushed against Alex's skin. "The hush is a memory, little key," Grayson intoned. "This resonance, it is your inheritance." Pressure crushed Alex's chest. Shadows coiled like living tendrils, whispers promising, "Welcome, welcome." He stumbled back, heart hammering, the darkness, a tangible vortex. Hours. The litany scraped against his sanity. He spun to flee, but the darkness was a sentient labyrinth, trapping him. Panic crashed over him as he struggled against the invisible snare. "Closer now," the voices breathed. Icy cold seized his limbs like manacles. "Release me," he screamed, but the shadows tightened their spectral grip, drawing him deeper. The cold intensified, extinguishing hope, the whispers a deafening symphony of possession. Forever now, forever. The shadows pressed in, scraping against his soul, his essence dissolving. Fear gnawed, threatening to shatter him. Desperate, he squeezed his eyes shut, focusing on the image of the doll. Vacant eyes glinting, watching. The vivid hallucination brought fresh terror. "Leave my mind!" he shrieked. Mocking laughter echoed in his bones. The spectral grip tightened, pulling him towards Grayson. "The nature of the invitation is often veiled," Grayson murmured. "And now, the feast begins." Alex's eyes snapped open, blazing with terror and rage. "No, I won't become one of you." He lunged, clawing Grayson's collar, screaming, "Tell me the price. What do you manage?" Grayson chuckled, a horrifying sound. "Price? Oh, little Alex, I merely tend the garden. The harvest is not mine to dictate." His calm fractured slightly, a tremor in his hand betraying unease. He leaned close, breath cold and metallic. Some patterns once glimpsed can never be unraveled. Trust the instinct that screams for ignorance. Alex recoiled. What horror was Grayson guarding? Then came the sound. Tap, tap, tap. Frantic scratching pulsed from beneath the floorboards, growing louder, more urgent. Alex stared at the floor, dread settling like a tombstone. What is that sound? His voice was a threat of terror. What's trapped or rising? Grayson's smile became a ghastly rictus. Some symphonies are composed in silence, little listener. Trust the wisdom of the unopened ear. Some thresholds offer no return. Pressure constricted Alex's chest. What pact had Grayson made? What was trying to break through? The shadows surged, sharp and menacing like teeth. Alex choked back a cry as the whispers returned, a possessive breath behind his ear. Ours the echo, ours the bone. With a final surge of adrenaline, Alex tore free, stumbling back, seeking escape. But the door behind him was gone, replaced by a wall of writhing shadow, barring retreat. The architecture of this place resists egress, little runaway. Mr. Grayson murmured, his voice heavy with ancient knowledge. You have stepped into the heart of the labyrinth, and within, the threads inevitably converge. The tapping beneath his feet escalated into a frantic, desperate assault, a furious scratching that vibrated through the house's very foundations, as if something ancient and enraged sought to claw its way into reality. Alex's gaze was locked on the worn floorboards, his breath seizing in ragged, panicked gasps, the unholy clamor seeming to scrape directly against his nerves. The shadows pulsed with predatory anticipation, twisting into grotesque configurations, and the air plummeted to a glacial temperature, pressing down with the suffocating weight of a tomb. What foul thing stirs beneath us? Alex's voice was a mere tremor of terror, barely audible above the violent scratching. What abomination is making that sound? Mr. Grayson's smile widened into a horrifying spectacle, bloodless and taut, though his eyes remained cold, fathomless chips of obsidian. He tilted his head, seeming to savor Alex's terror like a connoisseur. As I have endeavored to convey, little seeker, there are slumbering things whose awakening heralds only despair. Pressure constricted Alex's chest, his pulse hammering against his ribs. Stop your cursed parables, he snapped, his voice cracking with raw fear. What infernal secret are you guarding? What are you hiding in the bowels of this cursed place? Grayson's unsettling expression remained, a mask of sinister knowing, yet a subtle tremor now ran through his frame, a fleeting crack in his composure that Alex almost missed. He stepped closer, movements fluid and unnerving. Alex instinctively recoiled, his hands trembling, dread tightening its icy grip. You have tasted the fruit of forbidden knowledge, little inquisitive one? Mr. Grayson purred, his voice a soft caress, promising revelation. But the truest understanding often requires a descent. Alex froze, heart pounding, a chilling premonition seizing him. What? What are you suggesting? He stammered, voice thick with terror. Grayson gestured languidly toward the far end of the hallway, where a narrow door stood slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of absolute, lightless void, a darkness that seemed to absorb sound and sight. The frantic scratching emanated with unbearable intensity from behind this ominous threshold, a wave of nausea, laced with the sickeningly sweet scent of decay and damp earth, washed over Alex as he stared into the impenetrable gloom. The Undercroft. Mr. Grayson intoned, his voice dropping to an almost reverent whisper. That is where the echoes are, preserved, where the taken remain. Alex's stomach twisted, his mind reeling. What do you mean, the taken? He whispered, trembling. Who are they? What unholy price have they paid? Grayson offered no solace, his features an impassive mask. A subtle tightening around his eyes, a fleeting tremor in his jaw, hinted at disquiet. The price of knowing often outweighs the comfort of ignorance. Little seeker, he finally intoned, his voice a low, chilling resonance. Some vistas, once unveiled, forever stain the eye. The frantic scrabbling from below intensified, clawing at Alex's sanity. Pressure constricted his chest. His gaze remained fixed on the shadowed doorway, a vortex of dread and morbid curiosity. His hands trembled, the urge to flee warring with a terrifying need to understand. The bone-deep cold emanating from the darkness deepened, feeling ancient. Do not presume to disturb the slumbering echoes, little trespasser. Mr. Grayson's voice held a sharp edge of warning, hinting at a power he seemed to both respect and fear. Some awakenings unravel the very fabric of being. Alex hesitated, turning back to Grayson, eyes wide with a desperate plea. Why this charade? He demanded, voice shaking with fear and fury. Why not speak plainly of the horror festering here? Grayson's unsettling smile flickered, revealing stark vulnerability for just an instant. To name the abyss, little Alex, he said, his voice heavy with ancient weariness, is to grant it dominion. Some doors are not meant to yield to mortal hands. Alex's hands clenched. I will not be coddled, he declared defiantly, though his voice shook. I will confront this darkness, no matter the cost. Mr. Grayson's eyes narrowed, revealing that flicker of something alien, cold, ancient wisdom. Very well, little instrument of fate, he conceded, his tone hardening into something almost regretful. But remember, the curious cat often finds not knowledge, but its undoing. And the whispers, they savor the taste of the unwary. With a shuddering breath that tasted of dust and decay, Alex turned and plunged into the shadowed stairwell. The frantic scrabbling intensified instantly, a horrifying symphony echoing against the sudden, suffocating silence of the enclosed space. The shadows in the hallway above seemed to writhe, reaching like spectral tendrils trying to pull him back. The air grew impossibly cold, a glacial grip that felt like it was freezing the marrow in Alex's bones. A profound, suffocating dread settled like a physical shroud around his heart. Each creaking step down was a descent into deeper darkness, the silence broken only by the frenzied scrabbling below and the groan of aged wood protesting his weight. His hands clutched the icy railing, knuckles white, as he spiraled into absolute blackness that seemed to press against his eyes. The air grew thick, heavy with an indescribable odor. Sickeningly sweet decay mingled with a sharp, metallic tang and an undertone of something ancient, earthy, and fundamentally wrong. Reaching the cold, damp concrete floor, Alex paused, chest tight with apprehension, listening. The darkness was absolute, a tangible void swallowing all light. Yet, as his eyes strained, fighting to adjust, grotesque shapes began to coalesce. Towering shelves crammed with unseen objects, looming like monoliths in the gloom. The frantic scrabbling was localized now, emanating from a far corner with terrifying intensity, and a fresh wave of debilitating nausea washed over Alex. Then he saw them, the jars, row upon silent row, lining dusty shelves like grotesque trophies in some madman's collection. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, filled with nightmarish tableaus suspended in murky, stagnant fluids. Tangled clumps of hair, yellow teeth grinning from the slime, crude figurines carved with vacant eyes staring out, each jar a silent testament to some unspeakable violation. A captured moment of terror. A few held a thick, black liquid that seemed to pulse faintly with its internal light, casting eerie, shifting shadows. The sight was a physical blow. A violent spasm shot through Alex's stomach, his breath catching in a strangled gasp. What unholy reliquary is this? Alex whispered, his voice a raw tremor of horror. Mr. Grayson's voice echoed down from the top of the stairs, soft and chillingly detached, seeming to come from everywhere at once. They are the cartographers of lost Little Seeker, the keepers of echoes, each vessel a fragment salvaged from the shores of oblivion. Alex whirled around, eyes wide with a terror that threatened to shatter his sanity, staring up at the darker silhouette against the faint light above. What twisted purpose do these relics serve? He demanded, voice trembling. What fragments have been so cruelly preserved? Grayson offered no direct answer. He simply smiled, a predatory curve barely visible in the gloom. The answers you seek, little inquisitive one, his voice echoed, laced with chilling finality, lie not in the seeing but in the feeling. The frantic scrabbling reached a fever pitch, a deafening assault from the corner. Alex turned back to the shelves, his hands shaking violently. He reached a trembling finger towards one cold, slick jar nearby. The murky liquid within seemed to stir. A fleeting, distorted image, a face contorted in a silent scream, flickered within before vanishing back into the murk. Alex snatched his hand back as if burned, his chest feeling like a suffocating cage of terror. The shadows deepened abruptly, coalescing around the shelves, pressing in with suffocating intimacy. No longer just an absence of light, but a presence. The chill intensified, biting deep into Alex's soul. The scrabbling was now a deafening roar that seemed to vibrate in his teeth, and his stomach churned with primal fear, his mind teetering on the brink of collapse. What foul entity thrashes in the dark? He choked out, voice a broken whisper. Grayson's voice, now laced with a chilling amusement, drifted down. "Patience, little seeker. The unveiling is imminent." The air turned glacial, seeping into Alex's marrow like liquid ice. Shadows writhed, reaching like spectral tendrils, their edges seeming sharper now. Whispers swelled abruptly into a cacophonous chorus, seeming to emanate not just from the darkness, but from within the jars themselves. "Ours the breath, ours the bone, soon the self." Alex's chest constricted, breath coming in ragged, useless gasps. The oppressive weight intensified, pressing down, stealing his strength, making his limbs feel heavy. The jars seemed to pulse in rhythm with the whispers, their grotesque contents swirling. His eyes darted frantically, but the shadows were a living entity, closing in, twisting into nightmarish parodies of human shapes with hollow eyes. "What unholy hunger drives you?" Alex's voice was a trembling thread of defiance. "Why this violation?" Grayson remained a still sentinel at the bottom of the stairs now, having descended silently, his gaze fixed, expression inscrutable. "They are not driven by want, little instrument," he intoned, voice heavy with ages. "They are the want, an insatiable void that seeks only to consume, to integrate, to become. And you, Alex, you have unknowingly offered them a feast of exquisite vulnerability." A sickening lurch twisted Alex's stomach. "Feast on what?" he choked, trembling. Grayson's smile widened, bloodless and predatory. The tender bloom of terror, little blossom, the sharp tang of curiosity, the lingering despair. These are the delicacies they crave. Every tremor of your fear, every flicker of your intrigue strengthens their tether. Every act of resistance merely sharpens their appetite. Shadows surge forward, jagged edges feeling like tangible blades scraping the air. Alex stumbled back, a strangled cry escaping him, his heart hammering violently. Whispers intensified, clawing directly at his eardrums. "Ours the fear, ours the doubt. Feel the breaking." His hands flew to his head, digging into his scalp as if to physically block the intrusion. "Silence, you damnable things!" he screamed, raw and broken. "Let me be!" Grayson watched, detached, almost clinical. Shadows pulsed, chilling caresses brushed Alex's skin, leaving trails of icy dread. It felt as if unseen hands, cold and impossibly strong, clamped onto his limbs, anchoring him. A gasp tore from his throat. The cold seeped deeper, and a horrifying sensation washed over him. His very being felt like it was being pulled apart, dissolving thread by thread into the encroaching darkness. Fear gnawed, threatening to consume him whole. His struggles were met with implacable, unyielding resistance. "The currents of the void are not swayed by mortal will, little swimmer." "Mr. Grayson intoned, his voice a soft yet absolute pronouncement that cut through the chaos. "Every ripple of your defiance only strengthens the undertow. Every kick against the darkness merely hastens your descent." A suffocating pressure constricted Alex's chest, his breath hitching in short, panicked gasps. "Then why reveal this torment?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a desperate plea, turning his terrified gaze back to Grayson. "If you possess such knowledge of their hunger, why stand idly by while they devour me?" "Mr." Grayson's unsettling smile flickered, replaced for a heartbeat by an expression of profound weariness, a glimpse of the terrible burden he carried. "Control is a naive aspiration in the face of such primal forces, little anchor," he murmured, his voice low. "Containment, that is the delicate dance I perform, to hold the floodgates against the deluge. But your unwitting curiosity has weakened the barriers." A sickening lurch twisted Alex's stomach, his mind racing, struggling to comprehend the implications. "What have I done?" he whispered, his voice thick with a dawning horror that felt colder than the air. "How have I empowered this thing?" Mr. Grayson's eyes narrowed, and in their inky depths, Alex glimpsed that fleeting, terrifying flicker of something ancient, vast, and utterly alien. "You offered them a doorway, little architect of your undoing," he stated, his tone hardening, shedding any semblance of detachment. "You whispered their names in the silence with your relentless questions. And now, the threshold has been crossed." As if summoned by the words, the shadows surged forward with renewed ferocity, their jagged edges feeling like razor-sharp shards slicing the air around Alex. He stumbled backward, a strangled cry escaping his lips, his heart hammering a frantic tattoo against his ribs. The air grew impossibly heavy, a suffocating weight pressing down with the force of a physical assault, and the whispers intensified, a maddening chorus of possessive anticipation swirling around him. Ours the sight, ours the sound, soon the breaking mind. Alex's hands clenched into fists, his nails digging painful crescents into his clammy skin, a desperate attempt to anchor himself to the rapidly dissolving reality. "No," he choked out, his voice trembling but resolute. "I will not surrender to this parasitism." "Mister," Grayson's smile returned, a chillingly triumphant curve in the gloom. "Choice is an illusion when the tendrils have already taken root, little vine," he murmured, his voice a soft, deadly pronouncement. "You are but a vessel now. You simply have not yet fully yielded." The shadows writhed and pulsed with an erratic, violent energy. Alex felt the chilling caress of their jagged edges brush against his skin, no longer random, but with a distinct, possessive intent. It felt as though the shadows were indeed alive, sentient tendrils probing his defenses, testing the breaking point of his will, searching for cracks. The whispers intensified into a deafening roar, a cacophony of alien voices that threatened to shatter his sanity completely. "Ours the will, ours the thought, all is naught." Alex's defiance burned with a desperate intensity, fueled by the primal instinct for survival and a burning rage at his utter helplessness. "I will not be consumed," he screamed, his voice raw and desperate, a final act of rebellion against the encroaching oblivion. "I will not let you win." For a fleeting moment, the shadows seemed to recoil, their jagged edges pulling back slightly as if momentarily stunned by the raw force of Alex's defiance. A fragile, impossible flicker of hope ignited in his chest. But then, with a renewed, vengeful ferocity, they surged forward again, more aggressive, more chaotic, their movements violent and unpredictable. The icy grip intensified, spectral hands clamping down hard on Alex's arms and legs, holding him immobile. A horrifying sensation washed over him, as if his very being was being pulled apart, piece by agonizing piece, his consciousness fraying, dissolving into the encroaching darkness like ink in water. The threshold of dissolution is often paved with the stones of stubborn defiance. "Little spark, mister?" Grayson intoned, his voice a chillingly soft counterpoint to the escalating terror. Seemingly unfazed by Alex's scream, the more fiercely you cling to the shores of self, the more eagerly the undertow embraces you. Surrender. It offers a peculiar form of solace in the face of the inevitable. The glacial air intensified, a preternatural cold feeling less like temperature and more like the absolute absence of life, each breath stinging his lungs. The shadows writhed with palpable sentience, tendrils snaking across the floor, reaching, testing, hungering for purchase on Alex's very being. Whispers clawed at his eardrums, a deafening, discordant symphony of alien voices weaving pure dread into the fabric of his mind. Yield the breath, unburden the flesh, become the silent hush. Alex's chest felt like it was collapsing inward under a vice of terror, his breath in ragged gulps, offering no respite. The oppressive weight intensified, pressing down like an unseen leviathan, stealing his strength, blurring his perception at the edges. The jars pulsed with malevolent light, their grotesque contents swirling faster, seeming to sense the imminent arrival of a new addition to their silent congregation. "What profane communion do you seek?" Alex's voice was a broken, desperate rasp, barely audible above the whispers. "Why this violation of the self, mister?" Grayson remained unnervingly still nearby, a statue carved from shadow at the foot of the stairs, his gaze reflecting Alex's torment, his expression resigned, almost sorrowful. "They seek not communion, little echo," he murmured, his voice low and sepulchral, barely cutting through the din. "They seek integration, a return to the unified silence from which all fractured consciousness arises. You are but a stray note longing to rejoin the chord." Nausea twisted Alex's stomach into a knot. "I will not be unmade," he choked out, a final flare of defiance against the encroaching void. "I will not become a ghost in your silent symphony." Grayson's smile widened then, predatory, ancient hungers flickering in his eyes. "The illusion of separation is fragile, little fragment," he purred, his voice chillingly gentle, almost seductive. "Embrace the dissolution. It is not an ending, but a merging, a return to the source." The shadows lunged, no longer probing but tearing. Alex felt it viscerally, like the very fabric of his being ripping apart at the seams. A raw, primal scream ripped from his throat, swallowed instantly by the oppressive darkness. His limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, disconnected from his will, which was being leached away like color from cloth. Whispers intensified, a vortex threatening to shatter his sanity into irreparable shards. Release the light, embrace the shadow, become. Alex's hands clawed uselessly at the darkness, his body convulsing against the unseen force pulling him under. The cold intensified, a bone-deep freeze that felt like it was extinguishing the very spark of life. His boundaries dissolved, edges blurring, consciousness fading, unraveling into the void. Why this torment? Alex choked out, the words barely formed, hot tears freezing instantly on his face. Why not simply oblivion? Grayson's voice, soft as a shroud, drifted into his fading awareness. Oblivion is but temporary respite, little wanderer. Integration, that is the true transcendence. To become part of the whole, to silence the discordant note forever. With a final, impossible surge of adrenaline fueled by sheer terror, Alex squeezed his eyes shut, desperately clinging to the memory of sunlight, warmth, the feeling of his name. I am not a note to be silenced, he screamed inwardly, a thought almost lost in the storm. I am me. But the shadows were relentless. The icy grip tightened, crushing. The whispers became a seductive promise of peace through annihilation. The tearing sensation intensified. Alex felt his consciousness fray beyond repair, thoughts dissolving, scattering into a swirling vortex of fear and utter despair. The struggle is over, little one. Mr. Grayson's voice, now laced with a chillingly gentle finality, whispered from the edge of his fading awareness, a sound both intimate and infinitely distant. Embrace the quiet. Embrace the joining. The whispers reached a fever pitch, a triumphant, deafening crescendo of alien voices merging into one overwhelming command. Become. And then, as the shadows enveloped him completely, a final, agonizing surrender ripped through him. There was only the crushing weight of an all-encompassing darkness, a silence more profound, more absolute than any Alex had ever known, and the chilling echo of a single, possessive thought that resonated deep within, a thought that was no longer entirely his own. We are one now. Alex's eyes snapped open. A strangled gasp tore through the suffocating darkness that still clung to him like a physical shroud. His chest heaved, each inhale a desperate, burning plea for air that felt thin, insufficient, tainted. The whispers, those insidious tendrils of sound, still echoed in the hollows of his mind but changed now. A chilling, possessive residue of the subterranean terror. Ours the breath, ours the echo, ours the vessel. For a heart-stopping moment, paralysis gripped him, his limbs leaden, unresponsive, his body a frozen monument to fear. The phantom sensation of the shadow's icy grip lingered on his skin, a chilling reminder of his near assimilation. The oppressive presence of the darkness felt like a tangible weight pressing down, threatening to pull him back into its suffocating, silent embrace. But then, a primal surge of adrenaline, a desperate, animalistic refusal to become another silent inhabitant of that jar-filled hell, jolted through his veins. With a guttural cry that was half sob, half snarl, he forced himself to sit up, his hands trembling violently as he pushed against the cold, damp concrete floor, the rough texture, a stark, grounding reminder of his physical reality, however violated. The basement remained a cavern of oppressive darkness, but the shadows clinging to the walls seemed less chaotic now, more watchful, like hungry parasites patiently observing. Their jagged edges flickered slowly. The jars on the shelves seemed to gleam faintly, their grotesque contents still, as if waiting. The frantic scrabbling had ceased entirely, replaced by the relentless, insidious whispers, growing louder again, more insistent, weaving a net around him. No escape, no release. Forever bound. Pressure constricted Alex's chest, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He scrambled to his feet, legs shaky, weak, eyes darting frantically, searching for escape. The stairs were a faint outline in the oppressive gloom, but the shadows at the base of the stairs had thickened, coalesced into a near-solid barrier, jagged edges stretching towards him like grasping claws, barring the way. I will not become one of them. Alex whispered, the words a trembling, desperate defiance against the crushing weight of what had almost happened. I will not be claimed. Taking a hesitant step towards the stairs, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, Alex felt the shadows at the base surge towards him, erratic and predatory. He flinched back, hands rising instinctively, but the darkness hovered just beyond reach. A swirling, menacing presence, testing his resolve, seeming to savor his fear. No escape. The walls breathe. You are ours now, the whispers chanted, a mocking, possessive chorus swirling around him. Alex clenched his fists, nails digging painful crescents into his clammy skin, and forced another step forward onto the first creaking stair. The shadows writhed and recoiled slightly, like disturbed serpents, but he pressed on, ascending into the oppressive gloom, each step heavier than the last, as if an unseen weight chained to his ankles tried to drag him back down into the abyss. Reaching the top landing, he hesitated, staring at the sliver of faint, sickly light beneath the hallway door. The shadows were denser here, sharper, coalescing into more defined, menacing shapes in his peripheral vision. He felt their chilling caress brush against his skin, a spectral hand trying to grasp, to pull him back into the subterranean nightmare. No escape. The house remembers you are bound to us, the whispers echoed. Closer now, more intimate. Gritting his teeth against the rising panic, hands trembling violently, Alex reached for the cold, tarnished doorknob. A primal shiver traced its icy path down his spine as he twisted it. The door groaned open on protesting hinges. The hallway beyond was shrouded in a deeper gloom than he remembered, the faint light from the basement entrance barely piercing the thick, clinging shadows. A wave of nausea, thick with the scent of decay and something ancient, washed over Alex as he forced himself to step through. The hallway air was colder, heavier, and stagnant. The oppressive presence of the shadows felt all-encompassing here, pressing in from all sides. The whispers were louder, more insistent, a multi-layered assault threatening to crack his sanity. No escape. Every step is watched. You are marked forever. Forcing himself to move, limbs heavy as lead, Alex steadied himself against the peeling, damp wallpaper. Shadows flickered in the corners of his eyes, stretching like hungry mouths filled with deeper darkness. Their chilling caress scraped against his skin again, leaving a residue of coldness that seeped deep into his soul, a violation that felt permanent. He finally reached the front door, only to freeze, staring in horror at the wall of impenetrable darkness blocking his path. The shadows were most concentrated here, a churning vortex of blackness, sharp-edged and unforgiving. The chilling presence pressed against his skin with unbearable intensity, radiating a palpable malevolence, a sentient entity determined to hold him captive within these cursed walls. No escape. The threshold denies you. You are claimed by us. The whispers echoed triumphantly, swirling within the vortex blocking the door. Clenching his fists until his knuckles were white, Alex drew a deep, shuddering breath that did nothing to calm the frantic beating of his heart. I will not succumb, he whispered, the words trembling but laced with desperate firmness. I will not let you win. Pushing forward with a surge of pure adrenaline, hands outstretched like a blind man, he plunged into the barrier. He felt the cold, sharp edges of the shadows scrape against his skin, an agonizing sensation like tearing through solid ice or jagged glass. The chill bit deep, stealing his breath, but he pressed on, teeth gritted, muscles straining against the crushing resistance, forcing his way through the suffocating darkness, inch by painful inch. Finally, with a violent lurch, he broke free, stumbling out into the cold night air, collapsing onto the dew-slick grass of the neglected lawn. He lay there, chest heaving, gasping raggedly. The cool, fresh air was a momentary, shocking reprieve. Relief, potent and overwhelming, washed over him. He was outside. He was free. But the relief shattered like fragile glass dropped on stone. The shadows were still there. They stretched across the pavement and lawn in unnatural, elongated forms, their edges impossibly sharp against the dim moonlight, jagged outlines flickering violently. Faint, ephemeral faces coalesced within their depths, hollow eyes staring with unnerving, focused intensity directly at him. The whispers followed him out, louder now, relentless, echoing in the chilling night air, carrying further, clearer. No escape. The world remembers. You are marked for all to see, the voices chanted, mocking, triumphant, universal. A strangled cry escaped Alex. He scrambled to his feet and bolted, sheer terror lending speed to his movements. Feet pounded the pavement, the sound echoing unnervingly in the preternatural quiet of the street. His heart hammered against his ribs, threatening to burst. The shadows were relentless pursuers, flowing across the ground like spilled ink, jagged edges stretching like grasping tendrils, ephemeral faces flickering constantly in his peripheral vision, always just behind him. The whispers intensified, a venomous, swirling chorus clawing directly at his sanity. A chilling, absolute panic washed over Alex. The darkness wasn't just following, it was gaining. The houses lining the street stood silent and inert, their windows like vacant, cold eyes staring out into the night. An unsettling sensation crawled beneath Alex's skin, a profound feeling of being watched, not just by the shadows, but by everything, as if the entire neighborhood held its breath, complicit, aware of the unfolding nightmare. A violent shudder racked his body as he risked a desperate glance over his shoulder, his eyes wide with a primal, cornered fear. The shadows were closer now, almost upon him. Their jagged edges looked sharp enough to cut, their hollow faces more distinct, leering with malevolent hunger from the encroaching darkness. The preternatural chill intensified, a biting caress against Alex's exposed skin, as if the darkness itself was a physical entity attempting to reel him back into its suffocating embrace. The whispers were deafening, a swirling vortex of alien voices tearing through Alex's mind, threatening to rip it apart. His chest constricted painfully, his breath coming in short, shallow, desperate gasps that offered no relief. No sanctuary. Every path leads back. You are ours, the voices chanted, their tone shifting to a triumphant, mocking cruelty that scraped against Alex's raw nerves. Alex pushed his body far beyond its limits, his lungs burning with each ragged inhale, his legs screaming in protest, muscles seizing. But the shadows mirrored his every desperate move, their jagged forms stretching across the pavement with unnatural, flowing fluidity, their hollow faces a constant, taunting presence just inches behind him. The whispers swelled into a maddening cacophony, threatening to finally shatter his sanity into dust. No refuge. The night itself remembers. You are bound forever, the voices echoed, a chilling, absolute reminder of his inescapable fate. The houses remained dark and lifeless, their oppressive silence amplifying the frantic pounding of Alex's footsteps on the asphalt and the insidious, swirling whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It felt as though the entire neighborhood was holding its breath, a silent, vast audience to his final, desperate moments. Another desperate glance over his shoulder sent pure, undiluted, icy dread coursing through Alex's veins. The shadows were closing the final gap, jagged edges reaching like skeletal fingers tipped with frost, hollow faces chillingly defined now, empty eyes burning with a cold, possessive light. The cold intensified, a biting, suffocating pressure. Paralyzing panic washed over him. He was trapped in a spectral cage, woven from the night itself. There was nowhere left to run from a darkness that permeated the very air he breathed. The shadows were everywhere now, a swirling vortex of malevolent energy converging on him, jagged forms twisting into grotesque parodies of grasping limbs and leering faces. The whispers grew louder, insistent, a suffocating chorus pressing down on Alex's chest, stealing his breath. No escape. The streets conspire. You are claimed, claimed, claimed. The voices hissed, rising to a final, deafening crescendo, a death knell echoing in the sudden stillness of the street. His foot caught violently on a jagged crack in the pavement he didn't see. He stumbled, momentum lost, hands scraping raw against the rough asphalt as he fell hard to his knees. The impact jarred through his bones. Shadows surged forward instantly, engulfing him, jagged edges looming like the teeth of some impossible maw, hollow faces leering down with empty, absolute triumph. Welcome home, the whispers chanted, no longer a cacophony but a single, unified, possessive roar that vibrated deep within his skull. Join us. Become us. Forever. Alex squeezed his eyes shut, body trembling uncontrollably, bracing for the final, crushing embrace. The tearing dissolution he'd felt in the basement. He felt the icy tendrils press against his skin from all sides, the oppressive weight becoming absolute, suffocating him. The relentless whispers tore at the last vestiges of his sanity, promising oblivion and integration in the same breath. But then, an unsettling, profound stillness descended. Abrupt, absolute. The whispers ceased mid-roar, cutting off instantly. The crushing weight vanished. The bone-chilling cold receded, leaving only the normal coolness of the night air. Alex's eyes snapped open, his chest heaving with panicked, ragged breaths. He stared, uncomprehending, at the empty street, his mind reeling from the sudden sensory whiplash. The shadows were gone. Utterly. The whispers were silent. The darkness felt different. Vacant. Less aggressive. Less sentient. Just night. Pushing himself up on trembling arms, body aching, mind a chaotic jumble of terror and confusion, Alex glanced wildly around, searching for any trace of his pursuers. Nothing. The darkness remained, but it felt inert, ordinary. Had he imagined it? Had the intensity broken something in him? Taking a hesitant, shaky step forward, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, Alex took another, then another. He walked slowly, cautiously, every sense hyper-alert, straining for any sound, any whisper, any flicker of unnatural movement at the edge of his vision. The silence held. The street remained empty. The houses stood like silent, indifferent sentinels. With each agonizingly slow step towards his own home, a fragile, almost painful flicker of hope unfurled in Alex's chest. Was he free? Had he somehow, impossibly, escaped? Or had he merely been granted a temporary, inexplicable reprieve? A pause in a game whose rules he couldn't fathom? Reaching the end of the street, nearing his own dark house, Alex couldn't resist the urge. He stopped, turned, and cast a final, fearful glance back towards Mr. Grayson's house, standing silent and brooding at the far end. Windows dark, curtains drawn, the house seemed to exude a palpable aura of ancient secrets and contain malice. But then, for a fleeting, heart-stopping instant, Alex thought he saw it. In the upstairs window, the one Grayson had stared from earlier, was there movement? A fleeting shadow shifting behind the glass? A pale shape resembling a face? Or perhaps just the reflection of the moon on the dark pane, distorted by distance and his terror-stricken mind? He couldn't be sure. The image, or lack thereof, vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the dark, inscrutable facade of the house and a fresh wave of chilling uncertainty washing over him. Alex froze, his chest constricting, breath seizing in his throat. He stared back down the desolate street, eyes straining against the darkness, searching the upstairs window of Grayson's house. But there was nothing, just dark glass reflecting the indifferent moonlight, curtains still and undisturbed. An icy shiver, sharp as a needle, snaked down Alex's spine. Had he truly seen something? A face? A movement? Or was it merely the lingering residue of terror, his overwrought mind conjuring phantoms in the gloom? The question hung heavy in the cold night air, a chilling uncertainty that immediately began to corrode his fragile, newfound hope. He couldn't know the extent of the tendrils now wrapped unseen around his senses. Didn't understand how such darkness could bleed from one space to another, clinging like a phantom limb. Impossible to shake off. But as he finally turned his back on Grayson's silent, brooding house and walked quickly, almost stumbling, down the deserted street towards his own home, a gnawing unease persisted. It was more than just fear. It was a chilling premonition clinging like a second skin, cold and tight. The feeling of being watched was visceral, undeniable. A persistent prickling at the back of his neck, the distinct sensation of unseen eyes boring into him from the surrounding darkness. The shadows might have receded from immediate view, but Alex couldn't shake the absolute certainty they were still there, lurking just beyond the periphery of his vision, patient predators observing, waiting for the right moment to strike again. He had fled the house, yes, but the true horror, he instinctively, sickeningly knew, had hitched a ride, embedding itself in the deepest recesses of his mind. A parasite latched onto his soul. Alex slammed his front door shut with a resounding thud that echoed violently through the unnervingly silent house. His hands shook so badly, he fumbled with the deadbolt, the metallic click sounding small, pitifully inadequate against the unseen terror he felt pressing in from outside. The chain followed, a flimsy strand offering only the illusion of security, and finally, the second lock engaged with a decisive, heavy thunk. He pressed his back hard against the cool wood of the door, chest heaving, breath coming in ragged, shallow gulps that did little to fill the suffocating emptiness in his lungs. The house was silent, yet the silence was tangible, heavy and expectant, as if the very air held its breath, listening, waiting. His eyes darted frantically around the familiar living room, scanning every darkened corner, every elongated shadow cast by the faint street lamp glow filtering through the window, every subtle flicker at the edge of his vision. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of lingering fear and adrenaline poisoning his blood. He stared into the room's recesses, half expecting jagged shadow edges to suddenly coalesce, surge forward from behind the armchair or beneath the table, and reclaim him. But nothing moved. The shadows remained static, elongated, distorted by familiar objects, yet they seemed somehow poised, imbued with a latent menace, biding their time. Forcing a deep, shuddering breath that caught in his throat, Alex gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. "It's over," he whispered, the words a fragile, desperate reassurance against the rising tide of dread. "I'm home. I'm safe now." Yet, the pronouncement felt utterly hollow, a blatant lie whispered into the oppressive stillness. The lingering weight of the shadows was palpable, a suffocating blanket smothering the air. The whispers might have faded outside, but an inner echo persisted, a chilling resonance deep within his mind, a premonition that the horror was far from over, merely dormant, gathering strength. Moving through his house now felt like navigating a hostile, haunted landscape, his footsteps echoing unnervingly on the floorboards. He found himself compulsively checking every door, every window, fingers trembling as he ensured locks were secure, latches fastened, as if physical barriers could possibly keep out the intangible terror that clung to him like grave dust. But the chilling sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes following his every move, refused to dissipate. It clung like a phantom limb, a constant, gnawing presence twisting his stomach into knots and sending icy shivers crawling across his skin. In his periphery, shadows seemed to flicker and shift constantly. A fleeting ripple in the darkness under the stairs, a subtle contortion in the corner of the ceiling. These moments would catch his eye, sending jolts of pure adrenaline through him. He would whip his head around, heart leaping into his throat, ready to confront the horror. But nothing was ever there. Just the empty room, the silent house, the oppressive darkness seeming to breathe softly around him. He desperately tried to rationalize his profound unease as lingering fear, an overactive imagination conjuring phantoms from stress and exhaustion. But deep down, beneath the frantic attempts at logic, a chilling certainty took root and spread like ice in his veins. The shadows hadn't remained confined to Mr. Grayson's basement or the street outside. They had followed him, unseen passengers latched onto his fear, burrowing into his psyche. Collapsing onto the couch, body trembling uncontrollably, mind a chaotic whirlwind of terrifying possibilities and fragmented memories, Alex buried his face in his hands, trying desperately to block out the encroaching darkness, to sever the connection to the horrors he had witnessed and endured. But the feeling of being watched only intensified, becoming almost intimate, as if the shadows pressed closer now, unseen but felt, their jagged edges brushing against the fragile boundaries of his mind, whispering insidious, silent promises of despair and inevitable return. And then, his breath hitched, a silent scream trapped in his tightening throat. The doll, it sat perched impossibly on the edge of his kitchen table, its cracked porcelain face turned directly towards him, its black, vacant eyes seeming to pierce the gloom, locking onto his gaze with an unnerving, predatory intensity. Pure, undiluted terror ripped through Alex's body, freezing him solid where he stood. The doll hadn't been there. He knew it hadn't. He was absolutely certain. He had left it in Grayson's basement, abandoned amidst those grotesque jars, a relic of that subterranean hell. But now it was here, an impossible, unwelcome guest, waiting patiently for him. The hairline cracks had spread, spiderwebbing across its pale face like diseased veins pulsing faintly in the dim light. Its empty eyes seemed darker, deeper, bottomless pits, reflecting only the oppressive gloom of the room, seeming to absorb the faint light rather than reflect it. And the stitched seam of its mouth? It twitched. A subtle, horrifyingly deliberate, unsettling movement. Nausea churned violently in Alex's stomach, his mind reeling, refusing to accept the sight. He stared, locked in a terrifying paralysis, as the stitching twitched again, more pronounced this time, as if the thing were struggling to form some unspeakable word, or perhaps a smile. The air plummeted, becoming heavy, stagnant, and thick with unseen spores. A bone-chilling shiver traced its path down his spine as the oppressive weight of the shadows, which had momentarily felt distant, pressed in again with a suffocating force. "No," Alex whispered, the sound of trembling denial torn from his throat. "This isn't real. This can't be real. It's in my head." But the doll remained motionless, its cracked face frozen in that silent, mocking expression, its vacant eyes unwavering, fixed on him. Alex's hands clenched into fists, nails digging deep into his palms, the pain a faint anchor to reality. With a surge of desperate adrenaline overriding the paralysis, he forced himself to stand, legs shaking beneath him. He approached the table slowly, cautiously, each step an agony, his heart pounding a deafening rhythm against his ribs. The air grew colder with each step. The palpable presence of the shadows intensified, jagged edges flickering violently in his peripheral vision, a silent, menacing audience gathering to watch. The whispers returned, not gradually this time, but surging back instantly. Faint, insidious tendrils weaving directly into the fragile remnants of Alex's resolve. "No escape. The tether remains. You are marked? Marked." The voices chanted, cold and final, seeming to emanate from the doll itself. Reaching the table, Alex's trembling hands hovered over the doll before finally, reluctantly, picking it up. The porcelain was unnaturally icy, radiating a profound wrongness that seeped into his fingertips. Nausea washed over him again as he stared into its empty, soulless eyes. The stitching twitched again, deliberately, and this time, Alex swore he heard a faint, guttural sound escape it, like a dry, dead breath, an alien syllable trying to form, or perhaps a suppressed, chillingly inhuman laugh caught in its throat. "No," Alex said, his voice shaking but suddenly imbued with a fierce, cornered determination. "I will not let you do this. I will not let you win. Not again." With a strangled cry that was part rage, part terror, Alex whirled towards the sink, nearly dropping the doll in his haste. His fingers scrabbled frantically in the dish drainer, closing around the cold, heavy weight of a large kitchen knife. The whispers intensified instantly, becoming a relentless, maddening chorus burrowing deep into his skull, mocking his defiance. No release. The bond remains. You are ours, always ours. Alex raised the knife high, his chest heaving, his arm trembling uncontrollably. With a guttural roar of defiance and sheer terror, he brought the blade down with all his strength onto the doll's face. The sharp impact echoed loudly in the silent kitchen, but the doll remained intact. The cracks deepened, spreading further, but the porcelain held, refusing to shatter. The black eyes stared up at him, unblinking, unyielding, almost amused. A raw scream of frustration and horror tore from Alex's throat as he struck again and again and again, fueled by a primal, desperate need to destroy the physical source of his torment. Pain shot up his arm from the repeated impacts, but the doll refused to break, refused to shatter. The whispers surged back, louder, insistent, becoming a triumphant, jeering chorus celebrating his failure. The shadows pressed closer, jagged edges flickering menacingly, almost touching him now. Futile struggle. The link is unbreakable. You are bound, bound, bound. The voices shrieked, mocking, cruel, overwhelming. With a choked sob of utter despair, Alex dropped the knife, which clattered uselessly into the sink. His hands trembled violently, slick with sweat. He stumbled backward, away from the counter, chest heaving, breath tearing at his lungs. The doll sat there amidst the debris of his failed assault, its cracked face mocking him, its black eyes fixed intensely upon his. The stitched mouth twitched one last time, and this time, Alex was absolutely certain he heard it. A faint, chilling whisper slithering directly into his ear, intimate and final. "You can't escape me." The shadows lunged. Not gradually, but all at once. A swirling, converging mass of jagged darkness erupted from every corner of the room. Cold, sharp edges brushed against Alex's skin, no longer testing but claiming. A prelude to their final, suffocating embrace. The whispers intensified into a deafening, sanity-shredding roar. Alex felt his chest constrict completely, breath cut off, short, shallow, panicked gasps achieving nothing. He was trapped, utterly, irrevocably trapped in a nightmare that refused to end. its tendrils now wrapped firmly around his body and soul. Alex stumbled back from the counter, his eyes locked on the unyielding, mocking doll, his body trembling uncontrollably. The shadows in the corners of the kitchen writhed and twisted with a palpable hunger, their jagged edges growing sharper, more defined, like the teeth of some unseen predator closing in. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices that clawed at his mind, threatening to tear it asunder. "No salvation, the curse endures, you are marked forever," they chanted, their tone a cold final pronouncement that echoed the doll's silent stare. Desperation, a raw, primal force, clawed at Alex's throat, choking him, suffocating him with the weight of his utter helplessness. He had exhausted every option: flight, concealment, futile acts of violence, but nothing had availed him. The shadows were relentless, inescapable, and the doll remained, the unholy nexus, the unbreakable anchor binding him to this unending torment. But how could he truly destroy it? He had assaulted it with a heavy kitchen knife, his rage and fear lending strength to his blows, yet it had remained stubbornly intact, its cracked visage a silent testament to its unholy resilience. It was as if the doll existed outside the realm of conventional destruction, impervious to any earthly harm he could inflict. Alex's gaze darted frantically around the kitchen, his eyes scanning every surface, every object, searching desperately for any glimmer of hope, any tool that might offer salvation where brute force had failed. His eyes fell upon the fireplace in the adjoining living room, the cold, empty hearth, a stark reminder of the warmth and comfort stolen from him. A desperate, reckless idea sparked in his mind: fire, a primal element of purification and destruction. A long shot born of pure desperation, but it was the only flicker of possibility left. He lunged towards the living room, movements frantic, hands trembling as he snatched a can of lighter fluid from the fireplace shelf where it sat innocuously. The whispers erupted instantly into a frantic shriek, a chorus of enraged, almost fearful voices as he rushed back and doused the doll with the flammable liquid, the acrid smell filling the air, stinging his nostrils. "No, you cannot! You will not unmake us!" the voices shrieked, laced now with a raw, primal panic that offered Alex a sliver of perverse satisfaction amidst his terror. "We are eternal!" Ignoring the escalating fury, Alex's heart hammered against his ribs, his hand shaking so violently he fumbled with a matchbox, spilling several matches onto the floor. With a desperate swipe, he struck one, the tiny flame flaring to life, casting wild, dancing shadows, a fragile beacon against the oppressive gloom. The whispers reached a fever pitch, a deafening, agonizing chorus of rage and desperation, as Alex, his hand trembling precariously, held the flickering match towards the fluid-soaked doll. With a sudden whoosh, the doll erupted in flames. The acrid smell intensified instantly, heat radiating outwards, forcing Alex to step back. Porcelain cracked audibly and splintered. The stitched mouth unraveled completely. The black, vacant eyes seemed to melt, dissolve, screaming in silent, agonizing protest as their unholy light was finally extinguished in the inferno. The shadows recoiled violently as if struck by a physical blow, their jagged edges flickering erratically, fading, their oppressive presence lessening dramatically. The whispers died down abruptly, replaced by a low, guttural moan that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house, a sound of profound agony and dissolution. Alex watched, body trembling, eyes fixed on the pyre consuming his tormentor. Flames danced, greedily reducing the doll to a charred, grotesque husk. The heat was intense, the smell acrid, but Alex remained rooted to the spot, transfixed as the last vestiges of the nightmare were seemingly consumed by the fire. And then, silence. The flames flickered, sputtered, and died, leaving only smoldering remnants of porcelain and thread on the countertop. The shadows were gone. The whispers were silent. The oppressive weight that had crushed him for so long had lifted. The house was still quiet, empty, in a way it hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Alex's legs finally gave way. He collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor, his body trembling uncontrollably, his mind reeling from the sudden cessation of the assault. He had done it. He had actually done it. Destroyed the doll. Escaped the shadow's grasp. Or had he truly? As Alex lay there, utterly exhausted, emotionally drained, a persistent unease began to linger beneath the surface of his relief. A chilling premonition that something was still fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. The silence felt too absolute, a vacuum where the cacophony had been. It pressed in, heavy and unnatural, its very completeness, a new, sinister torment. The darkness felt hollowed out, stripped bare not just of malevolence, but of presence, leaving an unnerving void. And then, from the depths of that unnerving silence, he heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible tapping sound, delicate yet insistent, drifted from the direction of the front door. Tap, 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 tap. Alex froze, blood turning to glacial ice. The tapping was slow, deliberate, and measured, yet imbued with an unnerving persistence. A sound resonating with primal fear, instinctively recognized from the heart of his recent terror. The sound of something patiently waiting to be invited in. The darkness presses in, a tangible weight that suffocates all thought, as Alex lies prone on the floor, his body a mere vessel trembling with the echoes of terror. The doll's words resonate in the hollows of his mind, a chilling, irrefutable truth that extinguished the last flickering embers of hope. This is yours. You let us in. Every desperate act of defiance, every frantic attempt to escape or destroy the source of his torment, had been rendered meaningless. The shadows were an inexorable force, their grip unbreakable, and the doll's pronouncements had been a cruel, unwavering prophecy. He had, in his way, however unwitting, opened the door to this unending nightmare, and now the threshold had been crossed, the boundary irrevocably breached. The shadows were here, not just in the house, but within the labyrinth of his mind, and they would never truly depart. The air grew colder, heavier, a palpable manifestation of the encroaching darkness, and a bone-chilling shiver traced its way down Alex's spine as the oppressive presence of the shadows intensified, a suffocating weight that stole the very air from his lungs. He could feel the spectral caress of their jagged edges against his skin, the unseen eyes of their hollow faces leering down from the darkness, their whispers a constant, insidious assault on his sanity. No sanctuary. The curse endures. You are claimed, they chanted, their tone a triumphant, mocking cruelty. Desperation clawed at Alex's throat, a silent scream trapped within his constricted chest, suffocating him with the weight of his utter helplessness. He squeezed his eyes shut, his body racked with uncontrollable tremors, and braced for the final, terrifying descent into oblivion. He could feel the shadows drawing closer, their jagged edges pressing against his skin like the teeth of some unseen beast, their hollow faces looming in the darkness behind his closed eyelids. And then, the whispers abruptly ceased. Motion bled out of the encroaching blackness. The shadows became static aberrations, their threatening forms captured and held fast within the suffocating atmosphere, like insects trapped in amber. Silence crashed down, absolute and immense, broken only by the stark, lonely rhythm of Alex's shallow, panicked gasps against the oppressive weight of the dark. For a fleeting, deceptive moment, a fragile tendril of hope, a desperate yearning for reprieve, flickered within the abyss of Alex's despair. Perhaps, against all odds, it was finally over. But then, the silence was shattered by the doll's voice, soft and guttural, a chilling whisper that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the darkness, its tone laced with an ancient, knowing malice. "There is no escape, little invitation," it murmured, the words cutting through the stillness like a final, fatal blow. "This is your eternity now." The shadows flickered one last time, a final, violent spasm of malevolent energy, their jagged edges growing impossibly sharp, their hollow faces contorting into twisted, mocking smiles that promised an unending torment. And then, darkness. Darkness and silence lingers.
You are dissolving, piece by piece. Your mind will break and fall and break again, always returning to this single, suffocating moment. Every breath choked with it, every heartbeat pounding it deeper. No escape, not even in thought. This suffocating presence is your eternity now.
Silence returns. The shadows had not merely won, they had become the new reality. Silence stretches, but the silence was shattered again. Not by the doll's voice this time, but by a sound from within Alex himself. A low, guttural chuckle, distorted and wet, bubbled up from his own throat, a sound he didn't recognize as his own. Alex is huddled on the floor, but his eyes snap open. They are no longer the eyes of Alex. They are twin pools of polished obsidian, reflecting the faint, distorted room back with perfect, chilling clarity, vacant, ancient, utterly devoid of the person who was once there. The broken doll pieces on the floor seem insignificant now. The true horror is looking out from Alex's face. A horrifying, silent rictus is spreading across his features, mimicking the doll's earlier frozen expression, but alive somehow. Faint, web-like lines appear momentarily on his skin, like cracks in porcelain, before fading. The shadows don't need to lunge, they simply are. They flow not towards Alex, but from him, extensions of the void that now looks out from his eyes. The oppressive weight isn't external anymore, it is the crushing gravity of his own transformed being. Silence. Absolute, profound silence for several uncomfortable seconds. Then, a single, soft sound breaks it. A faint, delicate tap, 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 like porcelain gently striking wood. It sounds impossibly close. The tapping stops. Silence returns for a beat. Then, a final whisper. No longer just the doll's voice, but a layered chorus, ancient and intimate, seeming to breathe directly into the Alex's ear.
This flesh yields, this mind cracks, the vessel holds, all voices agree. Finally quiet, within these walls of bone, this host accepted. We reside here now, we are home.
Ha 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 ha!